hit go live, but it never goes live. But I'm here.
Hey,
Yeah.
happy Friday, everybody. We are back again for another week of Bioactive Live Q&A with, as always, we have Brian from Rubber Ducky Isopods, Kevin from OK Calyx and OK Calyx Genetics, and this week we have one of my favorite guys to talk to when I can find him around the state of Michigan, Sean from Rising Moon Medicinals. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Thank you.
So yeah, just quick introduction on who Sean is. If you follow him on Instagram, it's at risingmoonmedicinals.com. We were just literally talking about this, but a lot of his pictures lately have been focused on cannabis and cannabis genetics because that's been his life as a breeder and running a business and a hustle. Um, Selling some of the most unique terpenes and the most unique genetics that I've tasted is actually stuff that I'm running currently in my basement. Um, but it's easy to get lost in those pictures on Instagram and kind of lose the person who's behind it all. And that's, I love your cannabis pictures, but I think I like you a lot more, just deep down as a person and as a purpose-filled farmer. And that's why I always enjoy seeing you at Camp Compost. You're kind of a returning yearly kind of annual visitor there. You do at least one or two talks a year about regenerative practices, about closing the loop, stuff like that. So that's kind of synopsis on who Sean is as a leader in our community here in Michigan. And on top of that, Sean's into stuff like permaculture. I believe you're DEM certified as well. And you have obviously some great cannabis genetics. So, with that, Sean, I'd love to get kind of your take on what you feel regenerative agriculture is and kind of how that defines you as a person and as a farmer where you are.
Sure. I think it's sort of like at first, it seems like a really kind of like a lofty idea. When I got into farming, I was just kind of in college still, and I had a little studio apartment and a balcony that had a lot of sunlight. So I was like, oh, well, I might as well start to try to grow some plants because that sounds cool. And I grew like tomatoes and lettuce and dill and a couple of ganja plants. And then I just sort of, that kind of evolved into like a closet grow. And then I was going to school for like photography and film. And I just was kind of like, I like plants so much more. And this was kind of in the early 2000s. So medical really hadn't really like popped off that much yet. And the idea of being able to do that as like a 19-year-old was kind of like a lofty thing still. So I got into growing vegetables. I applied to an internship on an organic farm in Oregon, and they did like 5 acres of vegetables, and it was really cool. They had been there for like 20 years, and they knew exactly what they were doing, and their production system was just like compost only and some rock dust, and the results were just amazing. So uh, that kind of that from working at that place, it kind of set me off as like my standards were really high. Like I would go and visit other farms and be like, oh, this place has like weeds everywhere and like it's not really well organized. And like I just kind of like the more I would visit other people's operations, the more I like would appreciate like that place that I worked at was like legit. Like everything was refined. And that's one of the biggest principles of permaculture I think that a lot of people miss is like in order to be sustainable, you need to be organized. You need to have a sustainable way of harvesting. You need to have a sustainable way of using your time. Like all of these things are part of a designing a business or a garden or a system that's going to be productive. You need to account for those variables, and I feel like that's sort of like the missing thing that a lot of farms like don't really get to. Instagram now is like full of all these like vegetable farmers like hawking their education systems of like how to get organized and how to like come up with a crop plan, and like it's like the kind of like the new viral thing, because that's how you sort of like make $100,000 off of a half acre of vegetables like some of those people are doing out there. It's all about being like organized to the point of like, on this day I do this thing, on this day I do this thing. And as a farmer, that's sort of super important, because you need to develop a production system that has like a flow that makes sense for not only like your life and your time, but like your budget and the end result. Like everything has to make sense. And I feel like a lot of farms just kind of like jump into the growing aspect of it, and they kind of like ignore all of the like design principles of like, how does the thing function? Because if you don't have those things, you're probably going to fail. So that was like a huge lesson for me in farming from that farm. Was like part of their organization, and most of their success was built off of planning and organization and cleanliness and attention to detail. And, it really comes down to that in farming for being successful. That being said, I think that the ideal permaculture farm is like a perfect balance of like chaos and ultimate design. But so, that yin yang aspect is like what permaculture kind of is like the chaos and design, and like learning how to work with that chaos and incorporate it into part of your design. But what we kind of have to understand about permaculture is that like it's beyond the name of permaculture. Like what we're ultimately talking about are like indigenous techniques, and that's really who deserves like the credit on like all this stuff, like swales, berms, water ditch, irrigation systems, moving water, storing water, sinking it in the ground, symbiotic plant relationships, like all these things. That's all like native indigenous knowledge. So we've pulled from that as like a Western culture, and we call it permaculture now. But like, if we really want to get deep on it, like look beyond the modern interpretation, and you kind of figure out like, how did the Native Americans of your area do what you want to do? Because they did. They had that. They had like multi-species, multi-layered, trees, shrubs, everything down to the ground. Like there was a whole food production system that they managed, and the entire forest was essentially managed by these people for thousands of years and tended that way. And that's sort of where all these ideas are coming from, and that's what we're sort of like, the ultimate goal would be sort of to make our forests be that productive again, because the European people came and kind of chopped down all those trees. But Michigan used to be like chestnuts and tons of oaks and hickory, and like there's all these big black walnut, and there's all these like trees that are actually edible, and people tended, and those are really sort of like the most productive systems. So
it is, I will say, I'm very hopeful to see, because I live in in a suburban, town. It's definitely been kind of whitewashed, especially agriculturally. You know what I mean? A lot of green lawns and clean manicured things that um, you know, that are achieved using, poisons and fertilizers and stuff like that. But the thing that makes me hopeful about that is that even in a town like that where I live, there still is a group of people, not just us, because Sean and I live very far apart, and I mean, not very, but a couple hours apart in the state. And down here, there's groups of people that are into kind of peeling back history and planting native indigenous species of plants again, to the point where there's actually a seed library, and they have Michigan native plants, and around that library they plant native plants to show you and to show kids what brings in pollinators. So I'm sure that it's not the same thing in a public school system. They're not really necessarily teaching that information, or if they are, they're glossing over it. But there is some emphasis going on in society, and it's not that hard to find it when there's seed banks at the library. So, it's funny, like we're trying to like roll back, and that's where I'm at now. Is like in my yard, I'm doing things to kind of shift towards a permaculture as best as I can in that setting. And I moved into a yard with a lawn and all that, and half of it now is Hugle Culture, mounds, beds, rounds, and wood chip layering and food scrap layering like Kevin does. So there are people out there that are doing this, thankfully. And so I guess so with your permaculture, Sean, like if somebody was looking to start doing this, right, like right from the ground level, they have a yard kind of like where I was, where they're like, okay, I want to do something. I want to take the first step. Like, what would be your first step towards kind of shifting that mindset and that lifestyle and even that yard to a permaculture, regenerative, closing the loop? Like,
you would want to do like a site assessment. So you would assess like what is the water doing on the site, what type of soil is there, is there a slope, like all like the simple aspects of just like what encompasses the site that you're trying to work with. And then you want to be able to sort of utilize and harvest or mitigate certain aspects of of the way that the typography or the water flow or whatever it happens to be. Every site is unique, but
so think about before you put in a Hugle or a mound or a bed of any kind. Think about your low spot, right? Is that what you're saying? Like if you're in
like how does the water flow across the landscape? Because what ideally you could combine a Hugle mound and a swale. So like you could dig a trench and fill it, and then you could dig another trench right next to it, and then just put that soil on top of the mound that you've already created, so that you kind of have like a
stops the water
mound.
Yeah,
and you do that ditch on the side where the water is kind of moving across the landscape. You're going to create a natural sink and like a sponge type of deal. And then other things to consider are like the sun exposure, like what direction the sun is, what direction does your mound want to face, what type of plants are you trying to grow. Like there's a lot of different designs that you could go with based off of all the different variables, and that's again sort of like what makes permaculture so cool, is that balance between like the chaos and the order. And there's a lot of room in that interface to be able to be creative. So definitely like water is is so big in permaculture. And like the idea is that you don't want a single drop of water to leave your design, you know? So if water is like flowing out of your garden when there's like a big downpour, then your design is sort of failing. And so like just yeah, my advice is to like go out, you know, when we have a big rainstorm, put on your raincoat and go outside and see what's going on. Where are the puddles forming, and like where does it, you know, or maybe there's a roof that you could put a gutter on and then put that water into a tank and capture it, or you can dig a hole in the ground and fill it with gravel like a French drain style. But like whatever you can do to like sink the water into the ground or store it in a tank so that you can use it later, that's way better than it like leaving your site, because then it's gone. And the landscape should be able to handle like the shock. They call it like the storm shock, when you get a big downpour and there's all this water kind of like going everywhere and things flood and stuff. Like a good permaculture design can absorb that shock no problem. So that's why when they, on the bigger scale, when we're talking about building these designs with like machinery and like excavators and stuff like that, on a big scale, when they do permaculture design, they have to like include in like spillways and like overflow spaces, and like, because these things really do fill up with water and in big storm events, especially in like the Southwest, where there's a lot of this type of permaculture is huge in the Southwest because of the fact that it's like so water concentrated, and water is such a precious resource in the Southwest. So it makes a lot of sense.
So, boys, feel free to jump in here too if you want
I'm gonna
to.
jump in, Sean.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. What you just did was worth everybody's, or what you just said is worth everybody's time. I think I want to kind of like, what did I take away from that is look more at my landscape, look more at what's going on. Like you said, where's my water being directed, and am I losing a lot of water, or am I sogging up the place? Because I've already got a spot in my yard where water just naturally collects. I live right close to the Arkansas River. We have lots of little streams around here, and I'm low down in the ground. So when we get a rain, I get sogged up back there pretty well. But it drains off into a creek right behind my house. But that French drain I did, like I just called it a sink in a gravel hole or something like that, where you dig a hole, fill it with gravel, and it will kind of hold that water better for you, and maybe even be able. I assume maybe it hold it enough that you can use it, or maybe that you would have a drain out of that hole going someplace possibly. What would you do with that?
If you kind of like pepper those around the whole landscape, so let's say you made like 10 of them, then what would happen is that entire area, like, it depends on how big they are and how deep they are and how much they fill, obviously, but like there's going to be a radius around them that the earth soaks up that water. So it's going to be feet around there. So but basically those are going to act as like a sub-irrigation bed almost kind of does. You know what I mean? Like it's the same type of principle, but it's over the long term. We're talking about, you know, and sometimes these things, what people have found that's the cool, what like completely sold me on permaculture was how you can create a natural spring through these designs. And like there are people that have created swales along a hillside, and over like I think a 5-year period, it was, at the bottom of the hill a spring started to form, and they figured out it was because like the swales would all fill with water, and then the whole hillside had basically become like permeated, and then every time it rained the water would just like go right through the, you know, like wet soil wicks itself, sort of, you know what I mean? So eventually it hit the bedrock, and then it came out at the bottom of the hill and as a new spring. And that just kind of proves
That's cool.
efficacy of the design. Like it's real, it works. There's so much. I mean, the amount of water that it comes off of 1,000 square foot roof in 1 inch of rainfall is just astounding. And especially when you compound that over an entire year, it's tens of thousands of gallons. So, and that's just 1,000 square foot area. So
I want to ask you another question. I think this is based on, and the DEM is the Dragonfly Earth Medicinal. Am I correct? Dragonfly?
Yeah.
And
yep.
that whole idea, dude, I feel like I'm really close to being like that. Like I'm missing being able to recycle water, though. Exactly what you were talking about, catching water and actually using it and directing it. That's why that gravel pit thing was such an interest. But so could you, to put you on the spot, you have your 6 closed loop systems that you have like as a requirement? I think it is. Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just
at
this point, it's just kind of like a whole lifestyle. Like I don't even really think about it, but it's like I keep chickens and I make compost and I use the compost and I save seeds and I use cover crops and I store water and what's another one that I could say? Like I'll make like various different wildflower ferments over the summer as sort of like stuff becomes available or whatever I'm like inspired to do. I don't know. It just depends. If like my whole front field has like a whole bloom of dandelions, like I'll be like, oh, cool, I'll make a dandelion ferment. But like, I don't really like count on anything. People have tried to be like, you need to write down what you're doing, and it's kind of like it's almost like asking like a chef that works with seasonal stuff and changes their recipes all the time. Like it's just you're just kind of like, I don't know. I'm just kind of like inspired to do something, so I do it.
You're inspired by your environment. You're inspired by what your environment throws up at you, and then you react accordingly. I'm sure you have tons of them, and not just like 6, because that permaculture lifestyle, like you say, it's just anything you see that you can do or use or reuse, you just do it.
Yeah, and like, I live in a yurt. Like I chopped down this tree. And
hey, do you mind explaining what a yurt is? Because people are going to watch this on the replay and they're going to have no idea watching this for an hour what you're in.
If you Google it, this is a Shelter Designs yurt. That's the brand, so people could Google it. And
that's ironic. A guy in a yurt telling someone to Google it.
It's basically like
I love it.
It's a round structure that like this ceiling is, it's all
it's like wood framed and wrapped in canvas, correct?
Yeah, and there's some insulation, but and there's like a dome on the top that's clear so the light comes in. But they're pretty cool. I don't know. I think I would build an A-frame if we were to do it again, to be honest. But it's pretty cool. For the price, like, I mean, like, you can either get like a manufactured home, or you can get like a yurt, or you could build like a tiny house, basically. But for the price and the square footage, like, this is a 35-foot yurt, so it's 900 square feet. So it's pretty big.
Are you connected to power and sewer and all that? And I mean, are you connected to water and things like that?
So we put in our own well. We're on like a giant. The glacier here basically deposited, but when the glacier came through, it deposited like all this sand, and this was like a prehistoric beach along Michigan. The edge of Michigan where I'm at was all like a prehistoric beach at one point, And then the glacier just kind of like pushed all that sand like super deep where I'm at. So what that means is that we have a really low water table, and like I'm talking, you can't dig a hole like 6 feet deep without starting to hit water. So we were able to put in a sandpoint well, where you like dig a hole as deep as you can go, and then you start pounding pipe down. And we just had to go 15 feet, and then we've got like almost 5 gallons a minute, and it's really nice water. So that's what we did for the water. And this property, when I got it, it's got like a farmhouse on it from 1950. That had 300 amps put in it, with like they had 100 amps because somebody could build like a barn. I think they were thinking. So it was perfectly set up where we just had to like dig a trench, from that and like pipe it over to the yurt, and we were able to use that power. And then as far as the toilet, I've got a composting toilet in here, and we've got a gray water system. And the compost toilet, it's like the liquids and solids are separated. And then our liquids go into like down a pipe and out of the yurt a ways and go into a 5-gallon bucket full of charcoal. And then eventually, like, I'll just replace the charcoal. And that charcoal is like turbocharged. But we use enzymes to keep you have to use enzymes to keep the pipe, because urine has like crystallized pipes. This is the truth of homesteading here, folks. Talking about urine crystallizing your pipes, but it's what happens. So you have to use enzymes, and those enzymes have like an orange smell, and I don't necessarily like trust the product 100% for me to use in my garden. So I just kind of spread it around in the woods. Like, I'm cool with that, but yeah, that's what we do as far as. And then I've got like a laundry machine and shower and sinks and all that stuff. All of that goes into a 55-gallon drum full of charcoal, and then that has an overflow that goes just into like an earth filter that I have plants growing in. So that's a pretty fun. Yeah.
With spring coming up, can you give us an idea of what your vegetable garden looks like, or how you plan this? Do you grow from seeds, or do you have a guy that maybe pops them for you, and let us know how you garden?
Yeah, I'm actually, it's like next week is when I starting seeds for the season. Because it doesn't, up where I'm at, it's like kind of like in a little bit of a cold zone. So we'll still get a frost until like the end of May. So a lot of the stuff and the ground is still really, really cold. Like, it's pretty much, you wouldn't want to plant anything yet. So usually by the first week of May, like, I can actually put stuff in the ground and it will grow. I've put stuff in April from like the greenhouse, and then it just kind of sits there. The ground is still too cold. So that's not really worth my time. So I try to plan, and like, tomatoes is what I'm starting this week. Tomatoes and onions essentially is kind of what you start early, and then and peppers. All the sort of like 10-week to transplant stuff is when I want to start, because first week of June is when I can put all that stuff in the ground. So
do you grow and you have that stuff in like a greenhouse setting, correct? When you're doing like seedlings, and when you transplant, is most of that going outside? You save your greenhouses for other stuff, don't you? Or do you grow some stuff in those greenhouses?
I have grown tomatoes in one of my smaller greenhouses. I grew like a bunch of cherry tomatoes, and that was fun, but I don't need that many cherry tomatoes, to be honest. Like I've started to sort of realize that if it's better to have like 10 awesome plants than like 100 mediocre plants. It's less work and you get nicer fruit because you can pay more attention to the plants. So my tendency used to be like tons of shit. Like, oh, I need like a 100-foot row of this and a 100-foot row of that. And then you just end up like not really getting as much because you're like, oh, you have to use that much more compost, which maybe you don't have. So you don't put as much. Whereas if you did like a quarter of the amount and you use the same amount of compost that you should have used, like a couple inches instead of a half inch, maybe. Like sometimes that's sort of what it comes down to when you're trying to do this kind of stuff. You know, you really have to like make those decisions as to like, well, like my potatoes are just going to have to suffer because I don't have enough compost. And like, if you're trying to run a closed loop system, you can't just like go to the store and like get more shit. It's just like, you just kind of have to take that hit and be okay with it. Like there's so much acceptance in doing this. And like everyone else, not everyone else, sorry, but a lot of other guys are out there growing organic, using tons of inputs and crushing it, right? And then it's kind of like, here I am getting the same price for my product, but probably yielding 25% of somebody that uses like crab meal, kelp, barley, aloe, coconut, you know, quinoa, whatever, you know what I mean? Like that stuff really does work. That's the truth. Like the plants love it. And the key to it all in this closed loop thing is really, really, really good compost. It's just like, it's so hard to make like enough, you know, like you have to, it's like, oh, I have to get more animals, or I have to, you know, I have to grow. Like now I'm considering like converting an entire area that I used to grow other cannabis plants in. I just want to do the whole thing in comfrey now. Like, you know, like a ridiculous amount of comfrey. Like you have to like start thinking about like all these other ways that you can sort of fill those gaps. And especially like,
is nitrogen your biggest deficiency? Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's
like, is it just, or is it literally just the whole gambit? You're just
like, because
volume.
Of the sandy soil, it's sort of like everything. Organic matter just gets like compost just gets like eaten up. Like it's insane. You'll add compost to an area, you know, you work it all in nicely. A couple months later, it's like it never even happened. You know, it's like, so I'm really starting to get deeper into like biochar. I think is really going to be like huge for on a larger scale. I've done it on some Hugle beds and stuff like that, but it's sort of hard to tell. Like, as much as I'm into Hugle culture, I'm much more interested in like pure field growing for some reason, like almost like how they grow wine, like as minimal as inputs as possible creates the best product. That's sort of like what the essence of terroir farming is sort of all about. Like you want to use as little water and as little fertilizer as possible, and you get the best expression out of the plant, and that's what makes good wine. And I believe, from what I've seen, I believe that to be the same with cannabis. And I sort of feel like it's more in like the experience of, and the, it's, you know, it's not necessarily in like what I was talking about before. Like it's a lower yield doing it for sure, because you're not like watering every day and you're not like pumping them up full of all these newts. You're kind of, it's I dare to say, like it's a more elegant system where you're kind of like, when you work up with on-site, it sort of starts to feel different. They're like, you develop like an ownership over it in a way that I never had when I was just buying stuff, like, to be, to put it right out there. Like you, because it's like you're the alchemist, you're the one that's pulling stuff from the landscape and putting it together and taking a seed and then transforming it into like a garden. Like, it's really pretty magical. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but
So you spoke about Hugle Culture beds, and that's definitely one thing I wanted to ask you about, because you had an interesting take on that when I saw you last year at Camp Compost, and it was more of like I feel like people build Hugle Culture beds not fully understanding that your main goal is water reduction, right? Like, you're trying to, I don't know if it's necessarily your main goal. You're looking for longevitous growth and all that other stuff. But one of your goals with something like a Hugle bed is not having to water it, retaining moisture at an optimal level. So I wanted you to speak on kind of like the special sauce, the Sean special sauce kind of Rising Moon, how you do your mounds. And maybe that's changed since last year I saw you, but I really enjoyed that take on it, because it is all about capturing the moisture and keeping it in one spot. When you do a Hugle, you're trying to stop the overwatering and needing to water deep into summer.
Yeah, I've tried. I've just, through experimentation, I just question the use of it in cannabis production sometimes, because I think that it may be not what you necessarily want at that site. Like, it makes a lot of sense in areas where they have like prolonged, like, it doesn't, like Northern California, it's awesome there, right? They have rain all fall and winter, and then it's dry as fuck. And those Hugle beds can like capture all the rain like a sponge, and then those plants can kind of slowly utilize that throughout the whole summer. But just what I've found in Michigan is that, like, it rains here and we get storms and stuff where it's like kind of unpredictable. So like, it could be dry and the Hugle beds could crush, but it could be really wet, and your plants are just kind of like, you can kind of just see like the difference. I kind of like carve out spaces in the forest and then sort of like experiment in them. Like, oh, I'll make a bowl right here and then see what, that bowl will like capture rain, and I fill it with compost and stuff and put a plant in there. Let's see what that does. And then like, I've got a 4-year-old Hugle mound over here, and then like another plant I'll just like put in the ground and let the wildflowers kind of grow like up around it, right? And like, let's just kind of like see like what's going on, how do these turn out. And like, I always go for, as far as like the way that it smokes, that wildflower stuff is the best, because you're
just literally dropping it in the ground.
I mean, you basically, I take like a 1-gallon plant in it's like my compost mix that I try and make my own potting soil with like wood chips and forest debris and leaf litter and like compost, basically, that I sift. I kind of filter the compost and then use that and put wood ash and stuff in it. But so it'll have that, 1 gallon, but then I just kind of plug it in, and that's sort of it. Like, they don't get big at all though. Like, they get like 3 feet tall, and it's like, you wouldn't even think that it was like a full season plant, but the herb is so good. I'm telling you guys. And like, so many people have never experienced that. It's like, that's kind of what used to make outdoor herb good. That kind of like people talk about like a missing quality these days. And it's like, well, a lot of shit was guerrilla grown in situations a lot like that. And like domestic cannabis. And I know for sure I knew the people that were growing it where they would just put plants all around in the woods and go and harvest and like pray that they were there, and maybe like 12 out of 100 of them would make it, or like whatever it was. But that herb was really good. And I just feel like it goes kind of back.
Because it was illegal. It tastes so good because it was all that illegal work you did, and you're like, oh, well, yeah.
And it's like, what's cool about biodynamics is like, that's what sort of biodynamics is all about, essentially. Because Rudolf Steiner believes that sort of like modernism and humans domesticating plants has sort of taken them out of their state of like energetic healing and power that they used to hold. And that's sort of why like wild plants, wild herbs in like herbalism, wild herbs are much more preferred over like cultivated, because of those reasons. They sort of like hold a different property. And the goal of what biodynamic agriculture was sort of to infuse those energies of the wild into cultivated crops. So that's what kind of hooked me on biodynamics as an offshoot to like the permaculture thing. Biodynamics is super trippy, and
yeah, it is.
You don't have to like agree with like everything when you read it, but if you kind of like look at it as like one dude was sort of like channeling this information essentially, and just kind of look at it, like separate yourself from it a little bit, and don't have a judge, like don't look at it through like I'm going to tear this apart, but just like this is just this guy's experience, then it's actually really cool. It's like, wow, this guy had a really wild experience with his understanding of nature and how nature works. And
there's one thing that we love to talk about on here, and that we're big proponents of as a group of gentlemen, isn't it's taking things from everywhere and learning new things, and taking what works for you and the stuff that doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense, like in biodynamics, like it definitely something you should look into. But there are certain preparations where they're hanging certain herbs in, the stomach of a is it a goat or some sort of animal? You hang it on a stick, and it's collecting the energy from the air. I mean, it's like grounding rods, it's stuff like that, where it's like, I mean, maybe it's not the same thing, but it's a similar aspect where it's back to that kind of that holistic, natural connection with the earth. And so, same thing with another example would be with Jadam, in pure Jadam, they reuse their excrement, because they are poor communist farmers, like we've talked about, and that's what they need to do. But the point is that you take the good from and the things that are applicable. And one of the things that I use that I learned in biodynamics is I love yarrow, man. Yarrow is something that they use in biodynamics. I think, is it comfrey or is it borage is another one that they use heavily in biodynamics. So those are understanding the importance of those plants and where to find them, because here in Michigan, yarrow is in an abundance. And that's, hey, actually, question, what kind of cat is that? Somebody did ask. They said, is that a leopard?
She's a Bengal, which is Asian leopard crossed with a domestic cat. So
gosh, it does look like a leopard. It went in front of the screen earlier, and it looks just like a leopard. And it does.
She's really wild and cool. She's supreme hunter right here.
I bet
she's
she
still
got
a little kitten
to eat, huh?
Still a little baby.
She's cute. Super cute. What other animals do you have on the farm?
We have 2 other cats and 2 dogs and 13 regular like hens and a rooster, and then 5 bantams and a rooster.
So, can we talk about the chickens? Because I know that's one thing that you also use as a part of your farming, and on just in like a route for multiple different things. Are you using those just for eggs? How do you use your chickens?
Yeah, the chickens. It's there's I use them in like tons of different ways. Um, so I use them to make compost. I use them for eggs. I use them for like grasshopper patrol, I call it. And um, but them making compost is really like the coolest thing. So like I've got a bucket in the kitchen which we fill with our, as we cook and stuff, and put all the coffee grounds, everything goes in there that's organic basically. And then I have the chicken coop, and I have the chickens, like I have a pretty decent sized like fenced off area inside of there, and that's all full of leaves. So I like rake up, because it's Michigan, so we have leaves everywhere in the fall. So like um all around the trails and stuff like that, where the leaves pile up, I will wheelbarrow them into the chicken area and like make like a 2 foot deep. So like it's like even up to the edge of the fence, like the whole entire area is like 2 feet deep full of leaves. And then over the year, and then I dump all the food scraps just into there. So like every morning, that's kind of like a routine. You empty it, and then the chickens peck, whatever they eat, they eat. Whatever they don't, just gets scratched into the leaves. And then all the wood ash from our fireplace goes on top of all the leaves too, because a lot of the leaves are oak. So to kind of like counter the acidity, I'm adding a lot of that wood ash, because that changes the pH. So, and I've found that it helps the leaves break down a lot faster for whatever reason. So it's a pretty cool system. But essentially, those leaves get all like torn up because the chickens dig around and stuff, and I'll throw sunflower seeds in there, and then encourage the chickens to sort of like peck all around, and they scratch all those leaves up. And then you can go through with a pitchfork once they're broken down to a certain point and make like a big pile. And then the chickens will just tear that pile apart slowly over like the next couple of days. And then you just build it back up again, and they tear it back down again. And you kind of keep doing that over and over. And after like 3 weeks, you'll have like really, really awesome compost from doing that pile up and tear down method. And the chickens did most of the work, and they poop all over it. And yeah, and then that's what I use to like top dress around. And then I've got like a movable fence that I try to use, but they'll like jump. I have some unruly chickens. Like there's a handful of them that will like jump over a fence no matter how tall it is. So I might convert this year to like a movable. I have a greenhouse frame that I'm not using right now. It's like just like a 10 by 20. And I think I can maybe get like old skis from like a used sporting goods store, and kind of put the skis on the greenhouse frame, and then put chicken wire all around it and move that around with the chickens inside of it. And that way they can't jump out. But yeah, chickens have been a huge system, and you can really use them in a lot of different ways.
So, definitely didn't. So one thing about this show here, sorry, my green screen is all over the place in the back here. One thing about this show is we definitely try to keep it to an hour because of the time that it is here on the East Coast, and just because we all have other things in our lives. But I didn't want to go through this entire hour. I really want to keep talking with you. Hopefully we can have you back on again, Sean, for part 2 of this conversation on permaculture and stuff. But maybe we can shift over to your other passion project, or part of the passion project, which is your genetics. Somebody's specifically asking about the Manitow. Sorry, what? Not the Manit. What the hell? The Manistee. Is it the Manistee or the Manit? What did they say? Manitow. Manitou. Sorry.
Yep.
I was thinking Manistee because.
But yeah, it starts to get.
Why don't you talk about the Manitow and then maybe just go into just like projects you're working on?
Yeah, that sour Kim DF2, the Af Candy, and the green onion diesel, maybe.
Oh, wow. I'll have to make a list to remember all that stuff. The Manitou. So, Mike's Forest Farm. It's on Instagram. He used to have the farm across the street from me. When I moved in, like a year or so later, it was up for sale, and I knew that he and his wife were looking to buy a farm, so I just sent him a message and was like, "Hey, this place is across the street from me. You should check it out." And they ended up buying it. So he had a pack of ChemD Cross to Sunshine Daydream from Bodai, and it was just like a freebie that Bodai gave out, and he popped it, and one phenotype in particular was just like, I told him, I said, I will be surprised if this cut doesn't win a cup someday, but I don't think it's ever been entered, but like it is so loud and unique and potent, and it hashes, and it's kind of like the dream plant. And he had only grown it indoors, so that first year that he moved here, he put some stuff outside, and that was one of them. And like just going over there in September, and hanging out and stuff, I was just like, holy shit, this thing is, not only is it insane indoors, but like it's early and it's a beast. Outdoors, it was just amazing. And so that was an instant, like, this is a kind of like a super elite plant, right? Like I've got very strict standards for shit. Like if it's a bitch to grow, like cool, someone else can do that. Like I don't want to baby stuff. I'm not interested in that at all. Like I want plants that are just like, boom, I want to grow, I want to exist. This is what I'm all about. And they show it to you, and they kind of radiate that. So yeah, that ChemD Sunshine Daydream cut had that. And Manitou is that cut crossed to the Pine Sap Chem. And Pine Sap Chem is that cut crossed to some work that Green Bodai and Bodai Seeds released. So it's like a back cross in a way, but the male was not selected to be anything like the mom. So it kind of behaves more like a hybrid instead of a back cross. So yeah, that's the Manitou. I don't know what else to say about it.
I'm currently running from you. I've got your double sour jack and the purple Pez, and I mean 100% pop rate, obviously, but yeah, they're growing like they have places to be, which is a problem because it's only March 8th and I'm in Michigan. So and last year when I got seeds from you, I begged him to send me these Manistee OG seeds. You had some crosses and stuff, and that Manistee OG that he had, I remember we met up at Terp Wizard's house, and we were sitting there smoking everybody. Like, there was probably 30 jars on the table, smoking everybody's homegrown from the season, and that one there just was like a showstopper for me. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. So, definitely unique terps coming from this man's repertoire, and I like supporting people I like, but as importantly, I like supporting. I like getting genetics and growing genetics that aren't going to be a bitch, that aren't going to have issues with pathogens and pests, and that are going to do well in my zone. So that's why it's an easy go for me. Plus, I just like you and have learned a lot from you, so that certainly helps with the sale. But so before we get into questions, because there are some questions that people had through this thing, we just kind of saved them. Where can people grab your genetics right now?
Right now through my website, forestgrowncollective.com. We're just kind of on like the email order system, so paying with either like Venmo or Cash App was kicked out of. A lot of people ask about PayPal, but I've already been kicked out of PayPal. So,
did you say Forest Collective? That
Forest Grown Collective.
Sorry, my bad.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm working on setting up a new store where we can accept credit cards like right in the shop. So
right there, Forest Grown Collective. All right, so let's get into the questions. Brian, do you want to run through those?
Yeah, sure. The first question we have for you here. I am trying to add lime calcium to my pastures to increase pH. I made water-soluble calcium using eggshells and vinegar. Does anyone know the approximate percentage calcium level in the solution?
I would say you would have to apply it, and then you would want to do a soil test beforehand, and then apply it, and then do another soil test and see if it did anything, or if you need to do it again, or if you're good to go. I mean,
that's a tough one to answer.
I think that's also depends on like the exchange capacity of your the type of soil that you're, like some soils are going to absorb that calcium a lot quicker than others, and really there's a lot of variables there. I would say that like wood ash or gypsum, as far as like for pasture, is a much more easily calculable system, and that the spray stuff should be like more on fruiting type of plants, because they'll really benefit from that a lot. In like foliar sprays of calcium for like fruiting and flowering plants, as is scientifically proven, and it doesn't really matter what the percentage of calcium is if you follow the recipe and then you use the ratio at the recommended rate. It's gonna work. Like, I've done it, I've seen it work. So I make that. The problem is though, is that I make my own vinegar, and I keep making it with a different type of vinegar every year, so it's kind of hard to track exactly like. But if I have made it with like store-bought vinegar in the past though. So, and I would just say that a type of rock dust on a pasture type of level is like way easier to calculate, and the sprays are like concentrate that on areas where there's like fruiting and flowering, because that's where they benefit the most from it. And the sprays are kind of more precious. So
I just want to throw it over to Kevin to add. You got anything to add to that, bud?
I have nothing to add to that. I really don't use Like you heard you heard Sean say earlier, when he makes soil, he's digging things off the ground, bark, wood, blah blah blah, letting it just break down into great soil. For me, that's the idea: is try to focus on a good soil mixture. Try to get your compost going, soil layer going, the sponge wood, all that stuff that I show, and that I really don't have to worry about those other things. Like, and maybe I should worry about it more than I do, but I don't, because the results are just fine.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. What about using citronella mosquito plant as a KNF input to embrace the IPM possible benefits?
I mean, yeah, if you can grow citronella, I think that would be awesome. I think that in America, in all 50 states, you can grow thyme, and that should be an essential in everybody's garden, because thymol, the terpene thymol, is proven as a pesticide, and that's in like all those kind of like Jack's dead bug and like all that stuff. A lot of that stuff is thyme based. Some of them have like cinnamon or cayenne pepper or like whatever eugenol, but you can get eugenol from Tulsi. Strictly Medicinals seeds has a variety of Tulsi that they have bred to be super high in eugenol in particular, and that's a really great. Eugenol is like, if you get natural flea and tick stuff for your dog ever, I guarantee you that it's got eugenol in it. So yeah, I would just say like thyme and Tulsi are really the way to go, because you can grow those plants anywhere and it works. And I wouldn't make a ferment out of those. I would just do like a hot water steep. So like almost like how you would make tea to drink, but like double the strength, and then just dilute it to visual. So before you spray it, dilute it to something that you would look like you would drink as tea. That's sort of what I do, and that really seems to work. Like, and if you spray that and the plants have like zero issue with it, try adding twice as much of the herbal spray the next time, and you can kind of just see like what the upper limit is. I'm sure you could probably even go full strength, but like I use a backpack sprayer, so I'm not able to make that much tea. But I do have like a big giant pot that I specifically have just for making all that kind of type of stuff. And giant bed of thyme, regular thyme and lemon thyme I have. Those both work really well.
Are you adding a surfactant to that when you're putting it in a backpack sprayer?
Yeah, just like a couple drops of Dr. Bronner's. Yep.
Right on, man. Couple last questions here. I've been raising some mealworms, darkling beetles for animal food, but want to use their frass and chitin in an IMO1. It's mixed with their oat substrate. Now, what's the best way to make it an IMO?
Is that for me?
You and Kev should
if you
probably
could
both
answer
answer.
that.
Yeah, if you want to.
I know the answer, but
Yeah. We try to get a two.
Get a Rubbermaid tub and clean it out nicely, and then cook the rice. Do everything to make the IMO1, and then just put the oat substrate on one side of the tub and put the rice on the other side of the tub and close the lid, and it'll for sure transfer over to the rice, probably a lot faster than outside too. So yeah, just I don't even think that they have to touch. I haven't done that specifically with what you're saying, but I've done it with compost and it works. So
Yeah, if you just like often you could use this idea that I do with IMO1. I'll get the cooked rice and I'll take IMO3 and I'll finely sift it into the rice just a little bit and mix that up, let it sit in some warm place, and boom, it just takes off. So that would be the idea. Set it in a box close to each other. It can touch each other. You can put it on top of each other, or you could try to mix a little bit of the two together. I would take all the rice and mix a little bit of your oat substrate and put it in some warm place. It's going to take off. It's what Mother Nature does.
Yeah, totally.
Another quick question from the same individual. Should I mix it with rice 1-to-1 for the collection, or just use the oat, chitin, and frass as the IMO collection source?
Kind of just answered it there. Kev would sift it. It sounds like you just don't overthink it. Just like get them together. If you don't want them to touch, don't let them touch, but get them in the same container and let it go.
As long as you don't end up with something that like looks or smells really bad, then it should be fine. So it doesn't really, there's so many ways to do that. And there's a lot of variables.
If I use microbes from a different, I think you mean state, could and will it work the same as you do, or local folk benefit from?
As far as I know, they've analyzed IMOs from different places and they can't really tell that there's a difference. Like it's the same type of bacteria and stuff like that, like pretty much across the board. But that was kind of a critique of IMOs, the study was, or the way that it was written kind of was. So I don't know, it'd be interesting to do it and maybe not have a bias, but it seems like it would make sense. But then at the same time, it's like there's only so many things that will grow on rice, and like all those bacteria are found in like all soils everywhere. So I don't know. It's a complicated question.
Yeah, that one hits on the difference between KNF and Jadam and the different ways of gathering indigenous microorganisms. Like Sean said, there's so many ways to do it, but the KNF guy would say go out and gather it from many, many different places and let the strong take over and win and create your good soil that way. Whereas Jadam says use the indigenous microbes that are already working in your soils, your no-tills, your Hugle cultures. So just stay locally and use those microbes. But it's just the two different schools of thought. Mm-hmm. And basically it comes down to, do you have the time and materials and the will to drive 20 miles that way and this way to gather different IMO, or do you just want to sit in your backyard and put it in a 5-gallon bucket or a tote or whatever, put rice on your IMO3 or some leaf mold and just stay at home and gather it? And that's how I do it. Just stay at home and gather it, because like Sean said, I've never seen a massive difference. I've seen zero difference when I've collected IMO from different places or just collected it here. I mean, I make an integrated IMO where I use mine and 4 other growers. Marco is one of them. I use his IMO3 that I constantly collect IMO from, and I put all these guys IMO1 in a bucket and mix it all together. And so that's kind of like a dispersed across the country. There's a California guy, Marco's in Virginia, I'm in the middle. It kind of captures that idea, the KNF idea. But when I do my own stuff, it's just home. Easy.
Yeah, I'm using trifecta kind of IMOs around. I've seen better results, but I don't understand the science behind it whatsoever. So that's why we love having these shows and stuff to try to understand a little bit better. Shout out to Rick Easley. He's been with us since day one, man. Real quick, Sean, what's the best use for borage? I got some growing, and then we got one more question here for you.
Eat the flowers because they're awesome. They taste delicious, and it's just great as a chop and drop. It'll grow back really nicely, so you can just cut pieces off of it, and it breaks down really quick because it's got tons of water. It's filled with water, so that's it's almost like comfrey in a way. Like it kind of behaves that way. It's like a spiky comfrey, and Yeah, I love it. I grow it every year. I grow it to eat it mostly, but I have also grown it to chop and drop, and it works good.
You're only eating the flowers.
Yeah,
You said yeah, because the
just the
rest of the plant is prickly, right?
yeah, just
Yeah,
the fully open. It tastes like a cucumber.
beautiful little blue flowers, right?
Yep,
Yeah, yep. That's something I grow in my garden as
it
well.
was
Is comfrey.
used in the 18th century to cure melancholia, whatever that may be.
Yeah, if it's curing some of that crazy 1800s shit, then who knows what it's doing for your plants, guys.
Yeah,
Kevin, do you have
that's a
anything?
great
Yep.
standard. Did they use it in the 1800s? Yeah, make an extract with it.
Yeah, tincture it.
Anything to add for like the borage? Does it take over like comfrey or anything like that? That's why people always
It
want to use
does.
like
If you let it reseed, it will volunteer, but it's not hard to get rid of. Just pull it up before it puts seeds. You know, you're
You
good to
can
go.
you can make an FPE or a JLF out of it. It's a dynamic accumulator, is it not? So it's going to have a lot of micronutrients. It'll have nitrogen and stuff like that for you.
Yep.
But
I've
I personally chop and drop it, just like Sean said, because it's prickly. It's a pain in the butt to touch and deal with, and it's pretty. It's nice to have in the garden. It brings pollinators in. So I'm not trying to hack it down and get rid of it. I want it to reseed, to be honest.
yeah, for sure. It's a welcome plant. It doesn't compete with cannabis at all.
Nelson from Instagram. Can I add biochar right to my no-till areas?
Yeah, just work it in with your hands. I think it would be best applied, best mixed with whatever compost you use, and then top dressed that way. You know, but I tend to like to use biochar when it's mixed with compost because that makes a lot more sense to me. I call it lazy biochar, where I just like, because of the way that I make the chicken compost by adding all the wood ash and stuff like that, there's tons of charcoal gets in there. And then it's just like over a 6-month period, that charcoal absorbs all kinds of stuff from being in the chicken system. And then it's just kind of like a part of my compost. So I feel like that's how you get the most benefit from it but if you work it in with your hands, then yeah, you could put it right on top.
Kevin, anything to add to that, bud?
No, that's perfect. That biochar needs some microbes, so yeah, mixing it with the compost is a great idea. Soaking it in JMS. There's lots of ways to inoculate biochar.
Yep.
A little goes a long way with that too.
And Nelson said on Instagram, put it in my compost and use it that way. Just affirming what you said. Sorry, I had to read that out loud for some reason. Yeah, so mixing it with your compost.
Yep.
So yeah, that brings us to an hour 15. Really, really informative show today. I really think that the information that you have, Sean, is priceless, just like Kevin. And it's always just, man, the time spent with you is always worth its weight in gold. And
yeah, Sean, I learned a ton today, dude. The land, just the talk of hearing you say, "Look at your landscape." That was just fantastic. It was so simple, and it brought just an imagination of, here we go. So yeah, you got the creative juices flowing, man. I really appreciate all the knowledge you gave. Fantastic.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So before we sign off, I wanted to give you an opportunity to shout out the seed company again. Maybe go through the run, do a quick update if anybody has anything going on. Sean, if you want to start.
Yeah, I got a bunch of seeds ready for spring that I put a lot of intention into, and Really tried my best to sort of curate a menu and test stuff and run it outside and only release what's good. So right now our like Etsy shop got shut down, but we're doing email orders, so the information is on our website. And yeah, thank you.
You all go check it out. Go check his website out. I just want to hear about that Af candy, but we don't have time. But next time we'll have to get into your genetics specifically and the things that you want us to go purchase. Like if we were like, okay, I'm going to buy some, what seeds you want us to go buy? That's the kind of stuff I like to hear from you. So.
Okay. Well, I'm super stoked on our the Pine Sap OG right now. That's the Manistee OG crossed to Pine Sap Chem. And that's just putting out like flavors that are reminiscent of the old school, but also like something new to it that's really cool. So I'm really excited about. I'm super into the pine terps right now, but the Black Afghani work that I just put out is really awesome. The Black Afghani BC2 F4s. Anyone that makes hash should definitely check those out.
A lot of us make hash right here.
Kev, what do you have going on, brother?
All right. I got $100 winter bundles at okcalyx.com. I've got the IMO starter pack. These are usually about $120 to $130 packs, but go to okcalyx.com, IMO 3 starter pack, Turkey Tail 3-ways, the IMO Flight, Acorn IMO 3XL, and I got 2 FIMs and IPMs. You get 10 FIMs, and you'll get 3 different types of IPM products. $100 bundles this weekend. Go check it out.
Brian, how about you? How was the class? Sorry, we keep doing that to each other.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, it was great, man. I got to talk to some people that are really getting into it. 2 of these young ladies that I kind of admire in a way. They were actually doing isopods before me, and now they're coming to classes. We're learning together. So technically, it's the opposition, but they were very open about a lot of things. So I think there's going to be a community like we find in the cannabis community in my newfound world, where we do want to help one another. And so that was pretty cool to see. Things are really good, man. So when we're talking about these things, you guys are supporting rubberduckyisopods.com. You guys are now supporting shop terrariumtribe.com. So I just appreciate all of the things that are happening. We ship out once a week, and just couldn't be more grateful for the people that have been supporting both of those brands these last 2 weeks. Mark?
Yeah, so I got a lot of the stickers in for these springtails, which came out sweet. So when you order colored springtails from us now, you get the green screen's screwing it up, but you get these awesome 3-inch stickers, which I'm pretty stoked on those. And then they just announced for Camp Compost this year sponsorships and stuff. So proud to say that we're still a solvent company that can afford to sponsor such an awesome event. And they also asked me to come speak about soil organisms and stuff like that. So yeah, thank you. Proud about that. I'm sure that they've probably reached out to you, Sean, and if they haven't, they better, because yours is like the one that I have to go to every year, because I always get that one little, like you got tonight, Kevin, that one little tidbit, and it's usually enough to keep me going till the next time I see you. So
I was thinking about taking the year off to just enjoy
the event.
Yeah, like
I'm not gonna vend. I'm not gonna vend anything. I don't think. I'm just gonna go and do that and camp in my little vending spot.
Yeah. if they reach out, I won't say no. But I was just planning to I don't think I'm gonna vend anything, because everything's available online all the time anyways. So yeah, I think I just want to go and enjoy, because I feel kind of stuck at my table when I vend, and I can't really see any of the other, like I can't go to any of the other classes or anything like that without abandoning all my stuff. So yeah, I think I'm just going to go as a
civilian.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I'll buy my way in with a ticket.
Well, Kevin and Brian, I know you guys have heard of this event. It's truly is a remarkable event, and the biggest conundrum for me, as well as Sean, sounds like, is like I don't want to set up a table because I don't want to miss these people that are speaking, and a lot of it is just about who the same principles in the ways that we live and talk every time we get together. It's just the same stuff, same people, same wavelength, amazing property, and just a great time. So shout out to Camp Compost again.
And always cool music too.
Yeah, the music.
I don't know what the music plan is for this year, but I'm sure it's going to be cool.
Hey, I want to say thanks to Mark for the Bioactive fungus gnat eliminator you sent me. I have applied it. I've taken a video, and you can see I got fungus gnats. And so I've applied them about a day ago now. And so we'll give it a week or two and see how it goes. I've got about 4 more weeks of flower. So thank you. I appreciate it. Y'all go get that Bioactive fungus gnats, because I got fungus gnats, and I'm going to try to get rid of them with it. MIBeneficials.com.
Hell yeah, guys. Thank you. Sean, again, thank you so much for spending an hour with us, man. Your time means everything. And Kevin and Brian, your time as well. Love you guys. Till next week, we'll talk again.
Appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
See y'all next week.